the big news of the day is that apparently Donald Trump hates children. Now, if you're on the left, this comes as no surprise because you always thought that Donald Trump hated children, right? I mean, that's not a giant shock, but the reality is that Donald Trump supposedly is a guy who wants to remove children from the arms of their parents as those parents cross the border illegally. So you're coming across the border to make a new life for yourself, and you've brought your child, and you're picked up by ICE, and they cruelly take those children and they rip them away from you. They take the children and they rip them away from you. Okay, there is only one problem with all of this. Okay, there's only one problem with all of this. This is just not the case. Okay, the reason I say this is just not the case, I'm going to go through the actual applicable law here so that you know what it is that is going on. Okay, the reality is that the law requires that if you cross the border illegally and we arrest you for it, that your children cannot stay in custody with you. Okay, that's just the way it is. Okay, the way that it is according to the law. Okay, and that is a 2008 ruling from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. According to the law, you are not allowed to take the children and leave them with their parents in custody. Okay, so the Ninth Circuit Court ruled that non-detention of minors applies to accompanied illegal immigrants. The reason this happened is there was an agreement, it's called the Flores Agreement, back from the 1990s, in which the federal government was sued, and they came to a federal settlement, and the federal settlement said that when unaccompanied illegal children come across the border, they have to be released, remanded into the custody of some sort of parental figure or guardian in the United States. And then the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in 2016 ruled that those children actually had to be released, whether or not they came with a parent. So you come across with mommy and daddy, we still cannot keep you in custody for a long period of time. We still have to release you ASAP. Now, the problem with this is this has created a spate of headlines that Donald Trump, because he is more strictly enforcing border laws, that because he is doing that, this means that that he is somehow separating the children from their parents. Again, it is by operation of law that the kids are removed from their parents. It is not Donald Trump decided, I want to remove children from their parents, and therefore I'm cruel and nasty, and that's what I want to do. That's not how any of this works. Rich Lowry has a good column making all of this clear. He points out in his column at National Review today, the Trump administration is not changing the rules that pertain to separating an adult from a child. Those remain the same. Separation happens only if officials find that the adult is falsely claiming to be the child's parent, or is a threat to the child, or is put into criminal proceedings. And it's the last that is operative here. The past practice had been to give a free pass to an adult who is part of a family unit. The new Trump policy is to prosecute all adults. The idea is to send a signal that we are serious about our laws and to create a deterrent against reentry. Illegal entry is a misdemeanor. Illegal reentry, however, is a felony. When a migrant is prosecuted for illegal entry, writes Rich Lowry, he or she is taken into custody by the U.S. Marshals. In no circumstance anywhere in the United States do the marshals care for the children of people they take into custody. The child is taken into the custody of HHS, that's Health and Human Services, who cares for them at temporary shelters. The criminal proceedings are exceptionally short, assuming there is no aggravating factor such as a prior illegal entity or another crime. The migrants generally plead guilty, and they are then sentenced to time served, typically all on the same day, although practices vary along the border. After this, they are returned to the custody of ICE for deportation. If the adult then wants to go home, in keeping with the expedited order of removal that is issued as a matter of course, it's relatively simple. The adult is reunited quickly with his or her child, and the family returned home as a unit. In this scenario, there is only a brief separation. When it does become more of an issue is when parents start claiming asylum. If you claim asylum, adults are going to be detained longer, and the law is that you are not allowed to hold children for longer than 20 days in custody. And that's the Flores consent decree. A ruling by the Ninth Circuit extended the 20-day limit to children who come as part of family units. So even if you would like to hold a family unit together, even if you want the kid to stay with mommy and daddy, you cannot by operation of law. You are forbidden from doing so because the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals wanted to make it less appealing for the government to keep families in custody. They wanted all of these families released into the general population in the United States. Rich Lowry writes, the clock ticking on the time the government can hold a child will almost always run out before an asylum claim is settled. The migrant is allowed 10 days to seek an attorney. There may be continuances or other complications. This creates the choice of either releasing the adults and the children together into the country, pending the adjudication of the asylum claim, or holding the adults and releasing the children. If the adult is held, HHS places the kid with a responsible party in the U.S., ideally a relative. Even if Flores didn't exist, the government would be very constrained in how many family units it can accommodate. ICE only has about 3,000 family spaces in shelters. It is also limited in its overall space at the border, which is overwhelmed by the ongoing influx. So family units can go home quickly. All they have to do is not plead asylum, and they can all go home together. Also, there's a better way to claim asylum. So the separation of parents from children only happens if you are arrested. If you walk up to a border station in the United States, you don't go between border stations. You just walk up to, for example, the U.S.-Mexico border, down near San Diego. If you just walk up to that border and you say, I need to claim asylum, you will not be arrested. You're only arrested if you try to cross between the borders, because then the idea is probably you're lying to get into the country. Otherwise, you should just walk up to Border Patrol, not along the border, but in specific border stations, which everybody knows where they are, and then you claim asylum, and then you're not arrested at all. Then you get to stay with your kids. Right? Every indication is that the migrant flow to the United States is discretionary. It nearly dried up at the beginning of the Trump administration when migrants believed they had no chance of getting into the United States. Now it's going in earnest again because the message got out that despite the rhetoric, the policy at the border hasn't actually changed. Even if a migrant does have credible fear of persecution, writes Lowry, there is a legitimate way to pursue that claim. It does not involve entering the United States illegally. First, such people should make their asylum claim in the first country where they feel safe, for example, Mexico. Second, if for some reason they are threatened everywhere but the United States, they should show up at a port of entry. That's what it's called, the technical term, a port of entry, and they make their claim there rather than crossing the border illegally. There's significant moral cost to not enforcing the border, as well as Rich Lowry points out. If you just start releasing people in general into the middle of the country, lots more people are going to start crossing into the country illegally. And it is well worth pointing out that under the Obama administration, and under the Bush administration, really, immigration surges were rooted in government policy. So July 7th, 2014, this is from the New York Times. It was one of the final pieces of legislation signed into law by President George W. Bush, a measure that passed without controversy along with a pension bill and another one calling for national parks to be commemorated on quarters. This is a piece of legislation we're very proud to sign. A White House spokesman, Tony Fratto, told reporters December 28th, 2008, this program has been very effective around the world in trying to stop trafficking in persons. Now the legislation, this is the New York Times, right? Not Breitbart, not a right-wing publication. Now the legislation, enacted quietly during the transition to the Obama administration, is at the root of the potentially calamitous flow of unaccompanied minors to the nation's southern border. Originally pushed by a bipartisan coalition of lawmakers, as well as by evangelical groups to combat sex trafficking, the bill gave substantial new protections to children entering the country alone who are not from Mexico or Canada by prohibiting them from being quickly sent back to their country of origin. Instead, they have an opportunity to appear in an immigration hearing and consult with an advocate. This, of course, it puts strains on the system, lengthens the amount of time that these kids are in the system in the first place. So there are a bunch of lies that are being told right now, and we'll go through a lot of the lies that are being told by the media in just a second. But some of the lies being told are that Trump is randomly deciding to separate kids at the border. He doesn't have to do that. He does have to do that by operation of law. The only thing the Trump administration is doing differently is they are treating everyone who is crossing the border illegally as an illegal immigrant for prosecution, for purposes of prosecution. And then because you're doing that, the kids can't stay in custody with the parents longer than 20 days. And that is operation of law once again. Now, the media are going nuts over all of this, and they are making a huge fuss out of all of this. And they're showing up at the border, and they are showing up at these particular border stations where the kids are being held. The kids are being held separately in what are cages, essentially. Now, when they say cages, it makes it sound like it's like a chicken coop, like it's tiny. It isn't, but of course, technically they are cages because it's chain link fence separating people. So the administration has tried to fight back against the cages descriptor, saying the kids are being treated pretty well. The kids are being treated by some accounts well, by some accounts not as well. Apparently, one of the regulations on the books is that federal employees are not allowed to touch the kids for fear of lawsuit. So that means that some of the illegal immigrant children are changing the diapers of other illegal immigrant children they don't even know. The conditions are not good. All of this is underfunded. Congress could solve all of this, by the way. And Congress could solve all of this today. All they have to do is pass a law that says that if you come into the country illegally with your parents and you get to stay together. Right? You get to stay in custody together. Right? That would be the way that you fix this law. And then it's the parents' option whether they want the kids released to the custody of the HHS or released to the custody of a family member already in the United States, but they get to stay with the parents otherwise. Right? Congress can do that tomorrow, and Congress should do that today or tomorrow. Apparently, I'm hearing from the Speaker's office, from Speaker Ryan's office, that's exactly what Speaker Ryan is going to pursue, plus funding for expanded facilities to ensure that parents can stay together with their kids when they come across the border. So all of this is in the process of getting solved. I do find it somewhat suspicious that the media have decided to jump both feet on the bandwagon as though this is some sort of great human rights catastrophe brought on by the Trump administration, when, of course, all of this started under the Obama administration, or at least it was happening under the Obama administration. Brandon Darby from Breitbart, he had a bunch of photos. I remember when I was working at Breitbart still, he put out all of these photos. Right? These are all photos of a bunch of people, including children, who are at these detention facilities. Doesn't look that great, right? I mean, this is from 2014. Right? You can see all the photos. It's from 2014, and it's children who are separated from males, who are separated from females. These facilities are overcrowded. Right? All of this was happening in 2015. There's nothing new happening here. But the implication is there's something new happening here because it's Trump. And that, of course, is...
We will make America great again.